Lot 666 then, a chandelier in pieces. Some of you may recall the strange affair of the Phantom of the Opera, a mystery never fully explained. These lines feature as the opening of the musical The Phantom of the Opera, an adaptation of a book by the same name. There might be a little bit more truth to the fiction than one might think, however, when on May 20th, 1896, the weight of the chandelier of the Paris Opera broke and killed a woman in the audience. Yes, rumours had already long echoed through the halls of the Paris Opera that it was truly haunted. Hello and welcome to episode 23 of Certainly Strange. Today we are covering the true hauntings of the Phantom of the Opera, and I gotta tell you, this is just one of my favourite stories. I've always been a lover of the true stories behind my favourite books, how true life can influence fiction. And I've actually been thinking for a while about an episode of that time when a bunch of children suddenly disappeared from a German town called Hamelin. An event that truly happened and which was later spun out to become the fairy tale of the Pied Piper of Hamelin. And it makes you wonder how many of the legends and fairy tales that we know today are based on true stories. The Phantom of the Opera happens to be one of them, and it also happens to be one of my favourite musicals. I even went to see it twice on the West End, and I'm truly saddened by the fact that the musical will be leaving Broadway. But if the stories are to be believed, the opera ghost has a tendency to linger. The chandelier's counterweights came down with a crash, followed by screams as hundreds of people tried to flee. Madame Chaumette was not as lucky as the other members of the audience. One of the counterweights had landed exactly upon her head, cracking her skull and killing her instantly. Though this might have been just a very unlucky accident, there were whispers in the halls of the opera that it was not an accident at all. Someone or something was purposely sabotaging the Paris Opera. Performers at the opera would even place a horseshoe just above the right stage wing entrance to protect them from the ghost that was plaguing them, causing all manner of small accidents and misfortunes. Only people were not exactly sure whether it was a ghost or a real man. During the time that Gaston Leroux wrote The Phantom of the Opera, performers at the opera believed that there was someone secretly hiding in the opera house and hiding in the lake underneath the building. There were even some witnesses that have claimed that they saw a man dressed in a black cape and a mask running through the opera house. Renate de Waal claimed to have an answer to all of it. The Phantom, she said, was a deformed man called Eric, born in the village of Normandy near Rouen, and he suffered from, and stick with me here, purpurea cattonia tarda, which causes painful blisters on the skin that can begin to bleed and peel when it is touched. It can also cause and increase hair growth, as well as darkening and thickening of the skin. Eric was hired as one of the contractors by Charles Garnier to build the new opera in Paris. He liked to visit the opera, and when he did, he would wear gloves and a mask to conceal his deformity. Renate de Waal then goes on to claim that he fell in love with a soprano that performed at the opera and whom he kidnapped. She escaped and he died heartbroken somewhere within the halls of the opera, his spirit forever dwelling the halls. I have to add to this that nothing that de Waal has claimed can be traced back to any truth, and it is most likely that she just made this story up for an increase of publicity. But still, the people in Gaston Leroux's story are based on real people. There was a man called Eric Fanchon who did suffer from purpurea cattonia tarda. And there was a Swedish soprano called Christina Nilsson, who is claimed to have been the inspiration behind the character of Christine Daae. But how much more of the Phantom of the Opera is based on truth? Who knows? To this day, people who work at the Paris Opera still like to make the joke that whenever an accident happens, it is all because of the opera ghost. Whether a real or fake phantom truly has haunted the halls of the Paris Opera is unknown, but there is one ghost who might have haunted the set of the 1925 film of the Phantom of the Opera. But before I tell you about that, first a word from one of my friends over at the BooPod network.
Welcome to the mysterious world of the Skylark Bell. Our story begins on the outskirts of a small town called Pocket, where Margaret Phaeton, better known as Magpie, must connect a series of unexplained events, psychic visions, and century-old folktales before the mysterious silence hanging over the abandoned farm at Meadow Lane spreads to the entire town. The Skylark Bell is a fiction podcast in serial format, with new chapters every Friday and bonus episodes that recount real-life paranormal experiences. Find the Skylark Bell on all major platforms and at theskylarkbell.com. I'm Melissa Oliveri. Thank you for listening.
Universal Pictures was planning to film the first ever film adaptation of the horror classic The Phantom of the Opera. For this film, they needed a stage large enough to fit the entire interior of the Paris Opera House, and so stage 28 was constructed. It is not known whether the accident happened during the construction of the set or during the filming of the movie, but an electrician fell to his death, presumably while maneuvering around the catwalks at the top of the stage. Soon, people began to hear rumours that the set was haunted. There was a phantom, a real phantom, running along the catwalks. It had all the telltale signs of a haunting. Lights were reported to flicker and to turn on and off when no one was touching them, and doors were opened and slammed shut by invisible hands. Stage 28 was demolished back in 2014. So now we are only left to wonder whether there really was a true Phantom of the Opera. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of Certainly Strange. Please consider leaving behind a review on Spotify and following us on Instagram at Certainly Strange the podcast. Everything about the podcast can be found on the website certainlystrange.com, where you can find the transcript of the episode as well as the sources that I used in my research. And once again, thank you for listening. Bye! And now the bloopers of me trying to say Porperia Catania Tada. Porperia Colinia. From Porperia Colinia.